think it's an understatement to say that things have never really been that great between Epic Games and Apple. They have been fighting for years in the court of law in the US and Europe, and now it looks like pretty much any country with a big video game market, basically over who gets your money. And what that actually looks like is that Fortnite, probably like the biggest game in the world right now and has been for years, you can play that on Apple devices. But with that, Apple is kind of able to charge these extra fees if there's going to be like a third-party market selling games on their platform, and with microtransactions as well. That leads to a kind of tricky situation, and yeah, as I said, this has been something they've been arguing about basically since 2020 for the past 5 years now. It's still going on in certain ways around the world, and this all kind of started with Epic. They wanted to be able to have their own Epic Games store on iOS devices. They didn't want to have to go through the iOS App Store. And when you bring things into the context of just the Japanese market, the Japan market, there was just a law that was just put into effect like 3 or 4 days ago now that basically makes it so that Apple, the iOS devices, they have to allow third-party app stores to be present on their devices. Now, you see, we go back to June of 2024. This is when this law was actually passed, but it took about a year and a half for this to go into effect. We see right here on an official Japanese government website that this act officially came into effect between December 18th and December 19th. So yeah, about 2 or 3 days ago. So all is well that ends well, right? Apple has to allow the Epic Games store on the iOS devices, end of story. Well, no, not really, not end of story. You see, it turns out Apple did comply, but kind of going about it with a sort of massive loophole. So instead of basically just fully allowing this with kind of no strings attached, Apple did something that I believe they've done before in other countries when it comes to stuff like this. They said, yes, we'll allow these third-party app stores, but we're gonna charge like a bunch of extra fees. That is a bit of a problem. So because of this, Epic Games has said that they are not, as of right now, going to bring Fortnite to the iOS devices in Japan because of these crazy quote-unquote junk fees, as Tim Sweeney puts it. We see the tweet right here from Tim Sweeney, pretty much right when this was about a day or two from going into effect. He must have seen that Apple had already put out these fees, so he said, sadly, Fortnite will not return to iOS in Japan in 2025 as promised. Apple was required to open up iOS to competing stores today, and instead of doing so honestly, they have launched another travesty of obstruction and law breaking. In gross disrespect to the government and people of Japan, Apple chose poorly again. And just a few minutes after that, he made this post right here. He said, can you imagine the gamer and regulator uproar that would ensue if Microsoft required all games from Steam and Epic Games Store to call its Commerce Surveillance API and report all transactions back to Microsoft? That is what Apple just announced in Japan. So yes, the Epic CEO Tim Sweeney definitely on fire about this. He is not happy at all. And while I do understand that things like this are very complicated, I don't just think that there is, the good side and the bad side. I'm sure it's more complicated, more in-depth than that. I will say that to a degree anyway, I definitely see what he's saying. I do agree. It's a bit shady to just say, yeah, we'll comply, but we'll have these extra fees, these, junk fees, as Tim puts it. People expected this whole thing to break Apple's so-called monopoly in Japan, but this workaround is making it so that it's pretty much not gonna happen, at least as of right now. It's not really opening up the market, which is, I think, what the law was aiming for. And for Japan, for gamers who wanted to play Fortnite on iOS devices, it is unfortunately not gonna happen this year.